by, thank you for hitting the record. And then by 1984, you had moved on to the University of Pennsylvania, where you were in the Folklife and Folklore program, pursuing your PhD. And I don't have my notes in front of me because I've got this share screen. So can you, I know that your dissertation focused on education and elementary education, folklore and education. So I've butchered that completely. But that's okay. Jan has spent many years in Arkansas, working in southwestern Arkansas with the Texarkana Regional Area Arts Council, TRAHC there, and just made a really great big impression in Arkansas, and Arkansas was lucky to have her here working, and so we're really happy to give her a platform today to talk about Southern and African American gospel and folklife education in southwestern Arkansas. So Jan, you just go ahead.
Well, all right, you ready for me to yammer?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Well, it's interesting because TRAHC, well, let me give you a little history. TRAHC was founded in 1978 through an assessment by the Junior League of Texarkana, and very, very top down, and very top down, pretty much members of society, figuring out what do we need, and we need an arts, we need an arts thing, and then so what happened was in 78, the Junior League was founded in Texarkana in 1926. TRAHC was founded in 1978, and its mission at that time was to bring, as they quoted back then in 78, that its initial mission was to, quote, enrich the human experience in the region by increasing public awareness of and exposure to and participation in the arts and humanities in its many diverse forms. And really, TRAHC, the only reason why TRAHC, TRAHC, it was spelled that way, was really just not to even really throw in the humanities. It just was to balance out the name. Humanities were never really a part of TRAHC. And so here was this really kind of like top-down view of what this organization was supposed to do. And finally, in 2002, TRAHC expanded its mission to be more inclusive. And now its current mission and statement is growing people and community through the arts. No humanities, no nothing. It's really kind of interesting. And is a very exclusive kind of organization. They get arts and education, but it was not diverse. And it was only until 2001 that TRAHC actually reached out to the African American community through and developed a community committee, and now through the Black communities programs, which are many. Now they have African American representation in the program. In terms of the Folklife program, to be honest with you, I have no idea how it came to be. I think what happened was somebody at either the National Endowment for the Arts or the Arkansas Arts Council or the Arkansas Humanities Council or the Winthrop Rockefeller Foundation and reached out to TRAHC and said, look, there's funding. And TRAHC went for it. And they formed a committee of folklorists and community representatives and such to discuss what a folklife program would be like. And there were folklorists on this committee. Bill McNeil was one of them. Pat Jasper was one of them. And they talked about, the first part of after I was hired in 1990, I was able to see a transcript of this meeting that was recorded. And you could divide this transcript up into 3 parts, very much like a traditional narrative. And so the first part of this transcript was, I would call that lamentations. And the director of TRAHC and some others lamented what they considered the loss of heritage and tradition in the region. And so one of the things that they lamented was the new style post offices. The brick kind of blocky, post offices. And so here they were looking on the outside in, right? And what they didn't realize was that inside the post offices were still a real beehive of activity. And the only reason I knew that was because I was living in the Florida Panhandle at the time, and I had a P.O. box at one of the boxy post offices. And that's where you went to get your news. And it was, kind of neat there. It was a very social occasion. People were very friendly. I was always getting invited to church, but, people were really trying to make you welcome. The other thing, one of the other things that they lamented was you're going to love this, the use of green peas in Chinese food. Now, again, I read this and I said to myself, I said, I like those green peas, and and it was really kind of fun. To me, it was really funny. Hey, Rick. And and then they started talking about what a folklorist should physically look like. And beats me where I think, again, they were talking about, costumed concepts. And, and so they started throwing around names with the community agencies. And, one of them said, yeah, she really looks the part. It's like, and here I am. I apply. You might as well back up, please. There you go. Okay. And I was thinking, yeah. And I was thinking, boy, they're going to be in for a surprise if they hire me. And so we went to. I applied for the position, and I learned from the position from Willie Smythe at the State Arts Council of Oklahoma, because I had been working contracts with the State Arts Council of Oklahoma, and had become actually very close to some of the people there as friends. And so I applied, and sure enough, I got an interview. And flew. I was living in Tallahassee at the time, and so I flew into Texarkana, and was greeted and taken to a hotel. And they said, we've never used this hotel before. We're expecting you to tell us what it's like. And I gotta tell you, it was a real rat trap. And then that night I had to go to a Christmas party over at the executive director's house, and all the staff were there. And sure enough, I walk in, I was wearing a suit and everything. And, here they were, they got their first look at the possible folklorist, and who knows what they were thinking. And at any rate, I was hired in 1990. And I was working on a contract at the time in Southwest Georgia. And was getting letters from TRAHC. Well, let me back up. In December, when I had flown out there, I was interviewed by the entire staff. And all they could do was ask me 3 questions. How did I feel about driving on rural roads? How did I feel about driving at night? And how did I feel about driving on weekends, working on weekends? Well, after a while, you know, you get your formulaic answer, right? And I said, I don't mind. And then I told them, I said, look, anytime I go into a community, I don't care if it's for a long-time job or a short-term job, I always find a mechanic and a doctor. And it sort of seemed to shut them up for a little bit. And then I learned that staff had to file what were called daily reports. Every day we would have to write a report on our activities to the executive director. And the executive director would go through our reports and he would note which ones he thought were the most important. And then he had his secretary put together sort of like a gazette that we all got. Well, I'll tell you, you know, I thought that the daily reports, yeah, they could be seen as a real pain in the ass. However, I saw them as real teachable moments where I could explain in brief what I did. And I don't know where they are now, but I've got, 3 huge notebooks of my daily reports. And every once in a while, our director, every once in a while, he would get kind of pissed off at you and he would write a comment. And the staff came to know these as nasty grams. And so, we just, we all had our stick. So I was hired and I learned that the program was to be focusing on, could you mind turning down to the map, please? The next one. There you go. The idea was that my focus was supposed to be on Southwest Arkansas. So that's a 12-county region next to, if you can see it all right, southwest of Pulaski County, going down to Miller County, and then over to Columbia and Union County. That was my domain. But there was some confusion. One of the funders, the Arkansas Arts Council, was absolutely convinced that the TRAHC program was the state program, when it wasn't. And every year I was at TRAHC, I would have to go before the Arkansas Arts Council board and tell them what I had been doing. And in Southwest Arkansas, and they would, and they would jump down my throat saying, but you're supposed to be the state. It's like, you got to talk to the executive director about it. And they said, well, why can't we? And I said, I don't know. He never came, and neither did my supervisor. And so it was a real, kind of what I call a cluster of confusion. So I stayed within the 12-state area. And when I got started, a couple of things. When I first went to be interviewed, I was taken over to the Texarkana Museum System, which was just right down the street, 2 blocks away. And I was introduced to the work that Mike Lester had done in 1984, documenting gospel music for the Texarkana Museum's annual fundraiser, the Quadrangle Festival. And the folks at the museum showed me all of Mike's work. And unfortunately, it wasn't very organized, but I just recently actually asked Mike, how did he learn about the museum system? And he said he learned from it from our colleague, Sally's and my colleague, Pete Lowry. And so I was hired, started from scratch. I had to get equipment. And so I called Kenny Goldstein. He was my dissertation supervisor and my graduate group chairman at Penn. He was my adopted father. And I just asked him, I said, what do you suggest? This is the situation. And he told me. And I did it. Got a Marantz, it was a Marantz PMD 430 cassette recorder. Yeah, it was cassette time. I got another camera so I could use black and white and color slides. So the kinds of film I needed, the kind of tape I needed, and how the program office was to be furnished. And a file cabinet and, the usual stuff that's in your office. And so that was cool. So let the games begin. And, I started doing field work. And it was the usual, come on, for all of us, we have our usual, fieldwork techniques or tactics. Windshield surveys, newspaper, and the phone book. You got to remember, nothing was online then. And so I just did, newspapers, phone book, and then Mike had given me the names of African American gospel singers. Bill Isom in the Texarkana area, and James White in the Midwest area. And I started meeting and, documenting. And, my daily reports sounded like I was having a blast, because I was. And so I just started going to work. And if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. Please, there we go. I'd like to introduce you to one of the first people I interviewed, Mr. Earl Henshaw. Now, Mr. Henshaw was born in 1905 in Waldo, Arkansas, which is in Nevada County in the Southwest. And he said to me, I didn't know anything but Waldo until they raked me out of the woods and put shoes on me when I was 21 years old. Well, it made you laugh. It was great. He's a wonderful teller of tales. And he told me that when he was 6 years old, his mother put him on her knee and sang him the lines of the song. It would be, for you in the know, it would be number 446 in your redback hymnal. Blessed assurance. Blessed assurance, Jesus is mine. Oh, what a foretaste of glory divine. Heir of salvation, purchase of God, born of his spirit, washed in his blood. Now that got Mr. Henshaw hooked on singing gospel music. However, he did get married, and while he was singing in his early years gospel music, he was a fiddler. And his wife said, it's either the fiddle or me, and gave up the fiddle. And he started teaching in what were called singing schools. And y'all probably know, a singing school was when crops were laid by, a singing school would gather. And people who wanted to learn how to sing gospel songs, they learned how to sing according to shapes, diamonds, rectangles, circles, oval. And they learned how to sing according to shape, regular notes, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, etc. And in 1932, he started a quartet. By this time, he was a mattress maker and doing very well. He also had a radio program, and he was convinced it was the longest running radio program, and in fact merited the Guinness World Book of Records. And would you mind putting on the next slide, please? There you go. Mr. Henshaw died in 92. But 3 women carried on the Henshaw Trio legacy. At the piano was Drew Pipes, and turning the page of the songbook was Jean McCall, and then Mary Sutton of Magnolia. And they were all at one time members of the Henshaw Quartet. And they just decided we're going to carry it on. And so they did. And Drew Pipes, who's now Drew Reeder, she became Mr. Henshaw's caretaker because he was getting old and he needed help. And they would, she would take care of him and, go sing. They would go, and really the majority of their activities was to go to singings. And they would, as Mr. Henshaw said, they would go sing, 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 and sing, and not sing. Well, I went to interview him, and Drew was there. And from them, I kind of learned that there were some real specifics when it came to singing this kind of music. It was called Southern Gospel, and it's called convention singing, when people gathered together in groups and would sing. And so, what he did was he, put together his love of God into song, and he was very well known for it. And it's interesting that they also talked about the difference, how gospel music was for them a ministry. Now, a lot of us working in folklore, know that, but how they expressed it as a ministry was different. It was really important, was really heartfelt. And it was, they say, or Mr. Henshaw said, because you have religion or sing religious songs, or reason you cry all day, why not laugh and enjoy it? That's the way we look at it. And I enjoy the words, the tune, producing, and watching other people perfect or just sing. And the way the convention singings work is what would happen with these huge gatherings of people. And they would register at the front desk, and they would bring their songbooks with them, like Heavenly Highways and Songs of Zion, or the Red Bagged Hymnal. And And what would happen was they'd start with a prayer, and then the person leading the prayer would call up a person to select a song. And that person would say, okay, you know, song in Heavenly Highways, the song number, 25. And then they would select a piano player. And at all of the singings I went to, they always selected Drew. And here she was, 20, 30 years younger than these people, but they just really loved her. And so she was constantly slaving over a piano. And we talked when I met with them about a couple of things that they brought up in terms of a confusion, not a confusion, what would you call it? A challenge to the Baptist church, because a lot of Baptist preachers did not like that singing groups, quartets. As the way Drew put it, was that, and Mr. Henshaw did too, that groups were a competition to the pastor's preaching. So, and it was interesting because I've been working I was working at a church in Indianapolis, and I asked the preacher there about it, and he said the same thing. And that was in 2017. This was in 1992. And so it was interesting. And then Drew brought up something that she said, I wanted to add something to what you said about lyrics. And she was talking to me. And she said, have you noticed that a lot of the lyrics of the gospel songs, they talk about heaven? I said, uh-huh. And she says, going to heaven. And she said, I'd say 80% of it. And she said, well, it used to be even more so. And I always wondered why that so many of the songs were about heaven. And then it's sort of like that light bulb went off. And she said, well, it used to be, even more, I heard somebody say that the reason for that was back in the late 20s and 30s, which is when the heyday of these gospel songbooks and singing schools were happening. It's back in the late 20s and 30s when people were going through the Depression, Great Depression, that the only thing they had to look forward to was heaven. So they just wrote all the songs about heaven. And my response was, makes sense. And they said they knew it was going to be someday something a lot more joyful than what they were living. And then Mr. Henshaw kicks in and he says, yeah, those old gray-headed people, they came up the hard way, through the Depression and that stuff. And then we kind of talked on, and they said music prepares the heart. And then I asked if 80% are going to heaven, what's the other 20%? I was kind of curious here. What else? And I said, checking on your payments. It's like, Andrew said, yeah. If I were singing, and then she said, and this is one person's opinion. She was very, very cautious when it came to attributing her opinion differing from other people's. This is my opinion. It's not her opinion, my opinion. And I say this as songs tell a story. Maybe from some particular Bible story, I don't know. So many different songs. There's one song that was really popular then called Lazarus Come Forth. And it was the story about Lazarus, the death of Lazarus, and Jesus came 4 days late, 4 days late. And but he showed up and he raised Lazarus. And the funny thing is, the funny thing is that song was written by a guy named Aaron Wilburn. And Aaron Wilburn was also a well-known comedian, Christian comedian. And you can YouTube him. He's since passed away, but he's hilarious. And then I did have questions. One question I knew that there were two Carter families, and so I wanted to ask like the difference was. There was the Carter family on the Grand Ole Opry, and then there was another Carter family, and again. They spoke up and they said, no, the Carter family, Grand Ole Opry, which is Mother Maybelle and all that's not as refined as they said. I was like, okay. And so, yeah, so that I really got a good feeling about that experience. They really loved Southern gospel music, and they really loved being Southerners. And I went and I had recorded a couple of singings and stuff because Mr. Henshaw had invited me to his 85th birthday party, when they were going to sing, and then eat the groaning board. And it was just absolutely delightful. And you can really tell that people cared about that stuff. Cared about it as a ministry, but just cared about it as something very essential to their being, to their well-being. Now, I'd asked for some other recommendations of other groups. And I was told about, would you mind switching to the next slide? I was told about the Gospel Chimes. Now, the Gospel Chimes has been singing since 1969. They're a family group. On the left is Renee, and standing next to her is her husband, Jarvis. And down below there is Kathy. And then over there is the patriarch of the group, David. And they've gone through many transitions since founded in 1969, but they've always stayed within a Southern country gospel tradition. David had been playing guitar pretty much all of his life, and he used to play in the nightclubs around in Miller County, around Falk, Arkansas. And he was playing, and in the nightclubs, and that's where Kathy saw him, and she decided to, as David said, she chased me for a year and 3 months, and got married. And then and they got married on the 3rd of July, and I don't remember the year. They got married on the 3rd of July because David wanted Kathy to see fireworks. And soon after, a year later, their first child, Robert, or Bobby, was born. And they discovered that at the age of 3, he had perfect pitch and harmony. And his choice of interest, he would kneel down. David would tell me this. He'd kneel down at the coffee table and pound on it like it was a piano. And so when when at first they started singing, because Bobby was so short, they had to stand him on a pile of Bibles, talking about standing on the Word of God, and so he could reach the microphone. And then he started playing piano. And then a year later, Renee came on, and she started later on playing drums. And the way they talked about the music was, yeah, Kathy would say, no, it was Renee who said, you have a catchy tune and a catchy beat that gets you listening to a song, then that's what you're listening to, is the words. And when it's something you can tap your toe to, it gets your attention a little more. Like a song will stick in your mind, and with that, it will stick in your ears. It's a song that you'll go around singing all day. And they didn't make as much, they didn't make the kind of distinction between Southern and country gospel that Mr. Hinshaw did. However, the one thing that they did say was that what distinguished a Southern gospel song from, say, what's called praise and worship, is that the Southern gospel song has a scriptural text attached to it. You can listen to a Southern gospel song and you can identify the scripture right away. Whereas with what's called praise and worship, now you can't. And it's so that's kind of like the way it's done. And David said, we look at our singing as a ministry, and there's a lot of people that'll come out to a gospel singing that might not go to church. We don't limit our singing just to church. They do singing churches. I went to a singing there where there were 4 people in the congregation, but hey, as far as he was concerned, as long as there was an outlet, then he could plug in. They could plug into. He was fine, and they did. David did, broadcasts, for 1 year, and a couple of years and everything, and they do testify, but they don't spend a whole lot of time testifying. People come for the music, and that was really what's more important. Now, meanwhile, back at TRAHC, our executive director called me into his office, and he was troubled. He said, I don't understand why these groups use electric instruments. And I just explained, using fieldwork notes, just using fieldwork, this is what they say. This is what they do. This is their life. They're part of their life as Christians. Now, true, I should be talking, but I did. And even though the director disagreed, he said, oh, okay, then it's the message over the medium. Thank God, Marshall McLuhan. And I said, yeah. He still didn't believe me, anyhow. And after a concert, one of the programs we do, which was a concert where the gospel chimes played, the director called all the folklorists together, and he complained about this electronic stuff. And luckily, the folklorists who were there, kind of didn't, they said, look, one, these folks don't do their stuff 24/7. And if there's electricity, take advantage of it. And so they did. Now, I gotta say that the gospel chimes went through many changes. When I first met them, it was Renee, who's a nurse, and Kenneth, who was an EMT and a fireman, Kathy, a nurse, and David, he called himself a house husband and booking manager. By 1992, that kind of all changed. Kenneth, who had actually written a lot of the chime songs with scriptural connection, he left the group. And then soon after, Renee met Jarvis and they got married. But backtrack even more, and if you wouldn't mind showing the next slide. Meet the Hendricks Trio. Bobby, Rhonda, and Renessa. Now, Bobby was with the Gospel Chimes, keyboard player. Rhonda was in a group with her sisters, the Jenkins sisters out of Fort Worth. And Renessa is Bobby and Rhonda's youngest daughter. There used to be a story about David. If he wanted you to become a part of his group, he would invite you to sing with him. So he saw Rhonda and he asked her, would you like to sing with us? Rhonda's response was, according to legend, sure, I'll marry Bobby if you want me to. I'll marry Bobby if he wants him to. And sure enough, they got married. That was in 1988. And they got married in 1989. Rhonda continued to sing with the Gospel Chimes, with Bobby singing and playing keyboard. And then in 1992, the proverbial stuff hit the fan because Bobby, Rhonda, Renessa was not born yet, decided to split off. And they became and bringing in other people, they became the Hendricks Trio. As a result, David went into a really huge depression. He was not, it was awful. And I stayed in touch with them. You know, they lived right down the road from me. And that actually was the reason why I knew they were there, the Gospel Chimes, because they had a trailer and said the Gospel Chimes, painted on it was the Gospel Chimes. And it wasn't until the following summer that David and Kathy, with a little bit of help from Bobby, started singing again. And then slowly but surely. And now it's the Gospel Chimes no longer exists because David passed away. And but the Hendricks Trio is going really strong. And so just a kind of an interesting thing that happened. And it's all because, you know, they love, it's not only, you know, loving God, it's they love the music. And the music carries the message, and it just carried them forward. And now, oh yeah, everybody misses David, but you can't fix that. So, all right, we have, and do you mind taking the next slide? I'd like to introduce you to another set of groups, and these are with the Union Memorial Temple. And these are people that Mike Wester had introduced me to. Every week they get together, people would get together and would sing. And it was very different because there was no scripture offered, there was prayer offered. In fact, Pearl Williams there, and Bessie Jones, another woman, they all said that she could pray down the street. Very powerful prayer women. And but different kind of singing. You know, groups would come and register, and then they would play what they would call an A and B selection, but no introductions or anything. They just would come up and sing and get into it if they wanted to. Ray Allen would called it, folklorist Ray Allen called it drive. Is on and on singing. And would you mind going to the next slide, please? And fortunately, this is a typo, but second inside there is Bill Ison. And Bill Ison would coordinate all of the African American singings in the Texarkana area. I mean, he would get the singers, make sure that they were there, make sure that the food was available, everything. Just really incredible stuff. And these programs, you know, they would start, you know, at 1 o'clock in the afternoon and would go until 8 o'clock at night. And, but everybody was having a really good time. So what's all this stuff have to do with Folklife education, you might ask? Oh, very simple. If you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. Next one. There we go. TRAHC was very hell-bent on education. And but they didn't know what Folklife education was about. They just assumed that I would be trotting in tradition bearers to strut their stuff. Well, that's not the way it works. You know, you work with people, you work with teachers, you work with principals, you work with students, you find out what everybody wants, and then you find out from the tradition bearers what they want to do. And then you work together to bring together some program that is going to make sense to the kids. And so what happened was when I started at TRAHC, there was that misconception, and TRAHC wanted to, you know, and the Southwest Arkansas Arts Council in the neighboring Hempstead County, they wanted folk arts in schools. So they approached TRAHC and everything, and TRAHC said, yeah, because they saw it as a perfect opportunity, not just for education, but for revenue. And so I went with my supervisor, who essentially told me to keep quiet. And we met with the volunteer director of the Southwest Arkansas Arts Council, and told her, again, she was told, I didn't, she was told that TRAHC would charge them $1,000 for 5 programs, 5 one-week programs. And so once the deal was sealed, luckily enough, I could go on my own, and I did. It's like, you know, like, I don't have to tell them what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing. And and one of the opportunities was when I talking with the teachers and everybody, one of the things that they all said was, we want our kids not to forget their heritage, where they came from, and let them tell us why they think it's important. Yeah, made perfect sense to me. So one of the people who agreed to come into school with me was this gentleman here, Raymond Cleghorn. Raymond is a first name basis automatically. I met him at a festival in March 1990, and then later on we just actually started visiting. I would go over to his house and visit with him and his mother, Virgie May, and we just would sit around bullshit. It's fun. But Raymond, Raymond thought, oh yeah, I'd like to come into school with you. So we came into two schools. One school was in Nashville, Arkansas, and there, as an activity, we gave each kid a bar of ivory soap and a plastic knife. And after Raymond said, well, you want to see something on your bar of soap, you carve everything away that isn't the thing you want to see. And so the kids went at it. Well, by the end of the class, both Raymond and I looked at each other and said, the janitor is going to kill us. I mean, the entire floor, because it was a carpeted floor, the entire was covered in ivory soap. Well, class had ended and everything, and we got out of there as fast as we could. And went to a restaurant, and we were given menus. And Raymond said, I left my glasses at home. And that's when I learned. And then he later told me, he said, I only went beyond third grade. I can't read. But yeah, master carpenter, master woodworker. It's just amazing. And so we visited these kids at Winthrop, which is a town of about 400. And Raymond just sat there with the kids with wood and his knives and everything. And the kids asked questions and he talked with them just like they were neighbors. And that was really, and teacher kind of looks like she was asleep there, but she wasn't. She paid some attention. She paid attention, and she was a really nice person too. And then let's see if I can find what I'm looking for here. Interestingly, I did these classes over a week. Had teachers, tell me, how to make it better. Had the kids tell me how to make it better. They, over the course of time, they met not only with, Raymond and no gospel singers, I'm afraid. And then I was trying to think here. Let's see. A bootmaker, Jim Graves, who lived right in the area, and his daughter was in the class, and it was great. And so it's like everybody was connected, and that was the idea. Just maintain your connections, just do it. And so that worked out really well. And then on the next screen, Would you mind, please? Did you hit the next screen? There is Dawn Nix. And Dawn, again, on a first name basis. Don was born and raised in Texarkana, 1953. Stockmen were a part of his family heritage. And he was really into the cowboy way of life, sort of like riders in the sky, a cowboy way of life. And there's what I'm looking for. Yep. And he was I met him at a rodeo in Texarkana. He was sitting there with a saddle and some gear and stuff. And I just, I kind of like asked him,
what's he holding?
What's he holding?
Yeah.
A Sharpie.
Oh, okay.
Hold on. With these kids, these were in Hope at Beryl Henry School. And what he did with the kids was he not only, he used to be a Miller County deputy sheriff. And I remember sitting in his office waiting room, and boy, I mean, I heard him yell at a prisoner, and I wanted to run away so fast, but I didn't. But he was really into a lot of things related to cowboy life, and he made saddles. He was a part of our apprenticeship program, teaching his daughters how to make saddles. And but he was also interested in poetry. And so he shared this poem with these kids. It's called Short Horses. Not so many years ago, when I was bold and young, I thought that all good horses had to be tall and high strung. A man had to ride a horse befitting to his size. A big man riding a short little horse was a sight I quickly criticized. I could not imagine a reason for me to ride a horse that was gentle, slow, and on the smaller side. But now as time has taken its toll, and it's really begun to hurt, what for reasons unknown, I come unsaddled and wind up head first in the dirt. So I've been thinking and reconsidering about them horses, wild and tall. If I was to start riding them short horses, I wouldn't have far to fall. And so what he did with the students was he talked about a couple of things. One of the things he talked about was brands on horses and cattle, and how he and a number of his colleagues, cowboy colleagues, created a brand encyclopedia so that they could locate stolen cattle and horses. He was also in 1990 when the Red River flooded and closed up a part of Texarkana from Little River County. He was a part of the team that flew Chinook helicopters and rescued cattle. He was a Vietnam vet. He had to sign a contract saying that for 40 years he would not tell of his exposure to Agent Orange. And unfortunately, after the 40 years were up, he got cancer and he died. And his kids got sick too. And so that was that. And the other thing he did, he did have the kids make up a poem. but they would talk about, okay, what is a cowboy experience, you know? And it was like, they'd say, oh, green muck in his heel. So they would write it down, and green muck in his heel. And together they would put together a poem. And so I did that. Well, by then, you know, the class was up. It was time, you know, to split up. And I had to kind of make an exit, quick exit. And when I came back in the hallway, there was Don sitting in a chair, short horses, and with his guitar, playing cowboy songs for all of these kids. That was really cool. I didn't institute this. And, but you know, a love of what you do, a love, that love just was like, it just oozed everybody I met. It didn't matter what side of the politics they came out of or anything. I mean, it just, you know, was really incredible. And then now, meanwhile, back at TRAHC, I prepared a number of folklife study guides that were your traditional study guides for traditional, you know, teachers, you know, with objectives, questions, and questions on the subject, activities, a reading, you know, stuff like that. And the TRAHC Folklife Study Guides is what they're called. And they are available in full from ERIC, the Education Research Information Clearinghouse. And when I saw that, I said, wow, that's really cool. And outside of everything, I got involved with, you know, other folklife education on the outside of TRAHC. And I really have to thank Patty Bowman for that, because there were meetings that I wanted to go to, and she wanted me to go to. This was before the local learning network was formed, and she went to it and wrote the director and said that I needed to be at these meetings. And I went. And my interest in folklore and education, you know, has been very long time. It's been in it since 1980. And I think, you know, in graduate school, I learned a little bit about the teacher's craft from Sally Peterson, who's on board here. And I just, you know, my experience as a student really stunk. And so I guess I don't know, I just wanted to make it, I just wanted to do something that would, that might work. And so, and my story in terms of how I got into folklore, you can read in Featured Folklorist, AFS Featured Folklorist. But when TRAHC asked me about the whole thing about, you know, rural roads, night, and all that, and I answered, you know, well, doctors and mechanics. I gotta tell you, in my first year at TRAHC, I was driving up the road to Sevier County, which is in Northwest, about 50 miles outside Texarkana. And I was driving on the main road, Highway 71 North. I was driving, and I noticed out of the corner of my eye a log on the road, in the side of the road. And it's like, you know what I said to myself. And sure enough, a truck hit that log, lobbed the log across the way, and landed right into my car. Smashed the windshield wipers, put a dent in the hood. And I got on my radio and said, I've been hit. A trucker came around, got in his truck, and was able to get a tow truck mechanic, and called TRAHC. would you please call the place I was supposed to meet and cancel my meeting? And then I called the doctor and said, I think my eyes got some glass in it. So there we go. And so there it was. And when the insurance came to assess the car, they said, well, we could total it out. Or, you could leave the dent in the hood and we'll replace the windshield and windshield wipers. I said, fine, do that. And they did. Fast forward a number of years. I'm at a gospel scene and I'm walking around. I noticed a car, the back of which kind of looked familiar. It was a Subaru hatchback. And I said, it couldn't be. And sure enough, I went to the front and there was the gash in the hood. And after some walking around, I found somebody I could ask them. I said, do you know who owns that car? And they said, oh yeah, the pastor that runs this festival. God, it was really great. And I met up with him and I told him, that's my car. That was my car. Thank you. And that was on an occasion that the Gospel Times had gotten together and sang for the first time in about a year. And they got filled with, I guess we call the Spirit. And they just kept singing and singing and singing and singing. They were completely out of breath when they left the stage, but I hadn't seen them that happy in a long time. So the affinity part, people care about this stuff. There are people who, they walk the walk and they talk the talk. There's just no doubt about it. Now, there are going to be people that don't. So I guess that's really all I have to say. I just stand completely amazed. I'm never, my circumstances are such that my field work is limited, but my research is not. And I'm just going to keep going. So thanks.
Oh, Jan, thank you so much for sharing with us. That was so wonderful. I'm wondering if anybody has any questions or comments, anything you'd like to say. I mean, we only technically have 3 minutes, but I'm happy to keep the Zoom open if anybody has any questions or anything to say.
I would just like to make a comment that Jan, I studied history of folklore when I was with you at Penn, and I'm sitting here listening and I realized I'm hearing the history of folklore now, that the story of the development of all of these state folklorists and what happens, what emerges from that is really, I think, a key area. And listening to your stories just, kind of gave me a chill. This is our history now. So thank you. Great.
Oh, thank you, Sally. You've been quite an inspiration.
Good.
You've been a sanity saver in so many ways. I really appreciate it.
Dan, I just want to say it's great to be reminded of all that and to see you and to hear you. And it's been quite enjoyable.
Oh, Rick. Interesting.
That's me, Mike Lester.
Yeah, hey, Mike.
Hey.
Hi. Jan, too, Teresa Vaughn had to leave, but she left a comment in the chat that said she's always been in awe of your ability to do good field work, and she always learned so much from you. Thanks for sharing your experiences.
Wonderful.
Mike is on.
Thank you. Goodness gracious.
And I just want to, no, go ahead.
So
Okay.
Loretta and I worked together for a really long, we've worked together for almost 50 years.
Yes, we have. and you're always an inspiration to me and your work and your abilities. But most of all, you're caring for people. That's where it always should be, and that's where it should be grounded. But it's kind of funny listening to your stories because it's like, yeah, I totaled a state car one time. And one of the cowboys I did field work with was, his house was like that, what you described. All this cowboy art, all this stuff all over his house. And he wore a big, hat, and he was a saddle maker, but he was also a ranch manager near Kissimmee. But how they live, they walk the walk, they talk the talk, and they just love it. They just love doing it. And they're really good at talking about it and sharing it. So I just
My
think it's
car
so
wasn't
cool.
a state car. It was my car.
I know.
I
That's
had
what I
2
was like.
payments left on it.
Yeah,
Those were
see,
the
it's
days.
like, you should have, the stuff that went back and forth from the Illinois Arts Council to the agency that handled the money and all that stuff. That was, you could have probably filled a notebook like that thick with all the paperwork and stuff. But yeah, it was an interesting time. But yeah, it's really nice to see you. We talk on the phone, but it's nice to see you. You look really good. And I just think you're,
Loretta's working out with me on my book, my current
Yeah.
book.
and I'm the one who's learning here. I'm
Okay.
I
learning.
think you're both lucky.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Thanks.
Yeah. And there's Faith. Hey, Faith. There's my niece down here.
Aw.
Hi,
And,
Jan. It's so
hey.
awesome to hear you.
Oh God, well, you're going to give me a really big head here.
Yeah.
So what's really amazing for me is that I've been talking, I'm a teacher in Massachusetts, and I live now in New Hampshire, but I've been having these sort of pedagogical conversations with Jan for a really long time. And I've always been so incredibly interested in the work and your ability to tell a story. So I used to teach history, now I teach special education. And so the ability to tell a story and sort of to bring these different characters to life is fascinating. And then also to talk about them in the context of a classroom, I have to admit that's kind of my, my thing. So it's been really lovely to listen to you and to see you in, in professional context with all of these fine folks. I've known Jan, sort of as a professional aside, as opposed to, and as well as a family member. So it's very, very dear to me. And I appreciate all the things you're saying about her too, because you know her in that context.
Jan, I had a quick question. Good to see you again. I wanted to ask, did you, after that log incident, did you come across did I hear you right? Did you come across as a pastor to the people you were interviewing? You were singing gospel songs?
No. What happened was the car was repaired. The windshield was replaced,
Right.
and everything. And then 2 payments later, I sold the car.
Okay.
And I was at a gospel festival.
Okay.
And I was just walking around with my camera like we always do.
Sure.
And I saw this car. I saw a red Subaru hatchback.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, I wonder. And sure enough, I sneak up beside it. And there was the gash. The gash of Christ. And so some other people were walking by, and I asked them, I said, do you know who owns this car? And they said, yeah, it's the pastor who's running the festival. And I asked them, well, can you point them out to me? And they did. I introduced myself, and we had a wonderful visit, and the car was running great. But it had, for me, 150,000 miles on it. And
Wow.
When you're doing field work, you
Yeah.
gotta kind of read first.
That's par for the course, right? Are you going to Tulsa?
No.
No?
No.
Okay.
So
Anyway, good. I enjoyed it. Good to see you again.
Well, thanks, Rick.
And thank you, Lauren. and Virginia and everyone else involved putting this together. This was great.
Well, thanks so
Mike, I
much.
can't see you, but I assume you're hiding somewhere around in there. But anyway, Virginia, sorry about the sound issues I was having.
No worries. It's all good.
It's the kind of shit I had to put up all the time with my students. Sound emanating from God knows where, a barking dog or a cat. I mean, I was doing what I was complaining that they were doing. So anyway.
So does it, if nobody has any other questions, I
That's
think
it
we can
for
go
me.
ahead and end today.
I had one quick question.
Okay, go ahead.
Jan, did you see how many miles your Subaru had on it when you saw it at the festival?
I saw it at the festival. Yeah, about 200,000.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
You
That's
still
what we
got
do
it?
to cars.
Yeah, I asked the pastor, I just asked him. And there were some other things that were going on at that festival with the Hendrix Trio. That, oh man, too many challenges for them. Everything's fine now, but it's taken many years.
But you've
And-
weathered them all.
What's that?
You've weathered them all.
Well, it's not that I've weathered them. It's like, I think it's just that, I,
Yeah.
when you love them, you can't leave them.
Well, thank you so much, Jan.
You betcha.
Appreciate
Thank
everything.
you so much.
Thank
And
you,
thank you all
Arkansas.
so much for being here. And
Thank you.
we really enjoyed it, Jan. It was an honor to host you today.
No, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I'll talk with you all when I said I would.
Right.
Sally, I'll call you tomorrow, Sally. And
Sounds good, girl. Thank you.
all righty.
Y'all take
Bye,
care.
everyone.
Thank
Have a
you.
good
I really
afternoon.
appreciate it. Thank you so much. You have a good one.